hoping to come tonight and that we're not available. And I will say, take it away, Neng.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy, and thank everyone for being here. My name is Neng, and I am a documentarian artist, and um, I focus a lot of my time on, or at least recently, on Hmong music, traditional Hmong music, so less of a modern and pop music, but more of the traditional side of things. And so I want to talk tonight about what makes Hmong traditional music so special, in fact, one of a kind, and what we can learn from it as not even necessarily musicians or linguists, which is the side that I am more interested in, the linguistic side of it. And we'll talk more about why Hmong music is so involved with linguistics, but also just as the general public and people who listen to music, which is hopefully all of us. I told the third and fifth graders about one of the hardest questions I was ever asked in school was, what is art? And that included music, and art including music. We never really stop to think about what is art or what is music, but uh, when we do stop to think about it, it really makes us really think. So I want to talk about Hmong music and why I love it so much. First of all, tomorrow, yeah, I don't know if this applies to anybody, but being from Wisconsin, I love hunting, and tomorrow is the first day of turkey season. So I get to go turkey hunting tomorrow. Well, one of the things people do to locate a turkey is to get them to shock gobble. So in the spring, people go hunt turkeys because it's their mating season, and you pretend to be a hen and you try to call in a male turkey, which is actually backwards because in nature the turkeys gobble and then the female goes to the turkey, but you're trying to reverse nature there. But one of the things we do to try to get a turkey to gobble is not just to sound like a hen, but one of the things people do is they owl hoot and they go and sometimes when a gobbler hears that, they start gobbling out of shock or whatever it is. I'm not sure what the biological explanation for that is, but I always thought that was funny. When I started turkey hunting, I thought that was funny because there's this Hmong folk tale about why owls can turn their head all the way around and look backwards, and why, opposed to most birds, they have a really flat face and their beaks are small and their heads are kind of square. They're not like, they don't have a long, elegant beak like an eagle or, a crow or whatever bird. And the story is that uh, owl and muntjac, which is a little deer that does not exist in the Americas, but owl and muntjac used to be friends, and owl says to muntjac, in Hmong, platalaw no kao, platalaw no kao, and that means, or platalaw, in some version of the story, it says platalaw tua kao, and platalaw tua kao means owl is going to kill muntjac. So then Muntjac gets scared and Muntjac runs away as fast as he can from the owl, and he bumps into a sesame tree, and the sesame tree, the seeds, because he bumps into it so hard, the seeds fall off the tree and it hits this bird in the eye, and the bird goes blind because all these seeds are in its eyes. So it goes and it pecks at the fire ants, and the fire ants are now alarmed because the bird is pecking at them. So the fire ant climbs up the tree, or is running around all around the tree, and bites a squirrel, and the squirrel, now his tail hurts because he just got bit. So then he goes and he bites on an acorn, and the acorn falls and hits a bat in the head, and the bat wakes up and flies into the elephant's ear, and elephant gets scared because now there's a bat in elephant's ear, and the elephant runs and steps on chicken's nest and kills her babies. So then the chicken gets really mad and goes up to the heavens and asks the creator of sentient life, like, what can you just like help me? What happened? Why did my chick have to die? And they trace this problem all the way back to Owl. And Chicken is so mad that the problem started with Owl that Chicken slaps Owl really hard across the face, and so hard, in fact, that the owl's head turns all the way around 180 degrees. And ever since that happening, Owl has been able to turn its head all the way around, and that's why its beak and its face is really flat. But I always thought that tale, when I started hunting turkeys, was so funny because, turkeys are basically just giant chickens, and it's almost as if today they're still mad at Owl for killing their chick. So when you hoot like an owl, and interestingly enough, when I hoot like an owl, I hoot the words "platalaw no kao." So I go, and it has the same flow and the same emphasis. Each hoot has the same emphasis as those Hmong words. And owl or turkeys always, they gobble back, they back at that. So I want to really talk about why that's significant. And so in Hmong music, the thing about Hmong music is that it always imitates the Hmong language. So it's not just music like Western music, where it might be la di la lu lu lu, where it's just random sounds, but it mimics the Hmong language. So if you know what you're listening to and you speak Hmong, you can hear Hmong words within the music. So I want to just spend a few minutes to play a little bit of a song, and then I'll explain it, and I'll explain a little bit more detail. This is called Lutam Blai. It's made of bamboo. You can see the knot that is right here on the bamboo, has these knots, right? And it's just open on this end. There's a reed right here, which is a copper alloy. It's made of copper, zinc, tin, and silver. So those are the 4 primary elements, metals that they put in this reed. So just a little short snippet of this instrument, thank you. But all of those were Hmong words, and they're not just representations like two knocks means yes, and one knock means no. They're not, it's not that, and it's not lyrics. So what I would say about Hmong music is there's three things, right? It's also language mimicry, almost always language mimicry. So if you listen to what the music and you speak Hmong and you know what you're listening for, you hear Hmong words and how it copies our spoken words. And because of that, it's not lyrics like in Western music where we would have a tune and then we would have um, optional accompanying words. And the third thing is that one of the things that makes this possible is that our linguistic tones naturally fall on musical intervals. And it's really hard to explain that because one thing, tones aren't something that exists in English, but I think also uh, I'm not sure if anyone has really researched on this intensively to know that why it is like linguistically why this is the case. But even across languages, this happens. So in English, like the Solfege scale, when we go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, you can sing those notes or those words, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You can sing them in different scales, right? But they have those like steps in music, the intervals, like half step or whatever step that remains consistent depending on the scale. But in Hmong, we have these things called tones, where each sound bite, depending on how you emphasize the word, it will change the meaning of it, or how you emphasize that sound, it will change the meaning of it. So, for example, my name is Neng, and to say it properly, you have to say it in how you say do, re, mi. So in the mi, like do, re, mi. And I'm not talking about that note. I'm talking about how you emphasize the word mi. So do, re, mi, if you say do, re, neng, and you say Neng, that is my actual name. Do, re, neng. But if you say, instead of do, if you say Neng, that means horse. So it's not the note, again, it's not the musical note, but it's how you emphasize the word. But even across languages, when you sing these words in that note, there's certain ways that for whatever reason, it's emphasized and stressed in a certain way that kind of uh, spreads across languages. There are 7,000 languages in the world, and I haven't researched all of them, so maybe that's not true for all of them, but I know that for a lot of languages, that's true. So for, one word, one tone that people have a very easy time hearing is the airy tone, which, for example, if you took the syllable or the sound bite Neng and you said it with a lot of air, so Neng with a lot of air, Neng, that means person. And then if you say Neng, that means a life. And if you say Neng, that means like a crossbow or a bow. And then again, Neng is my name. And then Neng, that could mean like kind of asking a question about spirits. And then Neng is like a spirit or a chance that a possibility of things happening, the chance that governs the universe and things happening. So Hmong has for each sound or a phenome or how whatever it's called in psychology, I forget the field of study, but how you stress a word, there's 8 different versions of it, and that creates 8 different meanings. And it happens that in Hmong, those tones fall very well on the musical scales, and that allows Hmong to be. That's one of the very important things that allows Hmong to be reproduced through music. So when I'm out hunting, now it doesn't happen that much because there's technology and everything, but back in the day when people would go hunting, instead of yelling with our voices, hey, come over here, I really need your help to shoot this animal, you would whistle it. And if you whistled it, Toti no, come over here. Whatever you're hunting, if they heard a whistle, they would be a lot less scared than if they heard a human voice, like, oh, what's this weird thing that I've never heard before? You just sound like a bird, and you would be able to communicate that way. And our music works the same way. It reproduces those musical notes or those musical steps and those musical intervals. And that's one of the very important things that allows Hmong people to communicate with music. We talked about this, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and then this is an actual study where a linguist recorded saying something and whistling something in Hmong. So on the left here, at the left, this picture on top is saying the sentence, 到底要北母端盖, which is come over here and let's go hunting. And then at the bottom, they whistle that, 到底要北母端盖哦. And if you look at these graphs, they actually look exactly similar. It's just that the whistling is a lot louder, so the lines are bigger, and it's also more clear. It has less nuances, which is what spoken word has a lot of nuances. That's why everyone has a very distinct voice. But say like if you whistle and I whistle, it sounds more similar than if you talk and I talk. That's why on that bottom graph on the left here, you have more clear lines. And then on the right here, I redid this experiment by myself. This is the sentence "John Jaka," and John Jaka means I miss you a lot, and it's reproduced through talking and blowing this music on a leaf, which Hmong people use leaves as instruments sometimes, and we can play a lot of music on that. And if I have time, a little bit time later left, I can demonstrate that. But through this, you can really see that Hmong music and whistling it really does imitate the spoken word. So it's not just sounds that are random sounds. So if you look at it from a Hmong musician point of view, sometimes if you look at Western music, you might be like, how come Western music, it doesn't like mimic language? It's just like, so you're just playing random sounds? Like, why do you just play random sounds? Like, what is the purpose to that? You're totally just forgetting something that music is totally capable of. And of course, Hmong people don't think that because music is still fun to listen to no matter what. But if you're looking at it from like a strictly linguistic point of view, that would be what you're thinking. And so I want to challenge all of you to think of music a little bit differently starting today or whenever after today. But when we think about Western music, there's that scale, the staff, and you start at one end and you read it, and then you end, and you're in a rhythm of four, let's say 4/4 time, where it's 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. But I want you to imagine, instead of, if we didn't write music on a staff that went left to right, what about if we wrote music on a circle? So we drew like a clock, and we drew like a clock, and we divided. So we drew like a circle like this. Let's see if I can draw backwards. Like a clock, and we divided this into 4 quadrants. Now imagine if, like a clock, you had a minute hand or an hour hand or whatever, and it would move, right? It would move, and every time it went past a quadrant that was 1 beat. So this would be like 4/4 time, This would be like 1, this would be like a 2, this would be a 3, and this would be a 4. And you would read, and on each quadrant there would be a note. So instead of having music written on a line, you would have music written on a circle, and that clock hand would go around, and if you wanted a faster tempo, that minute hand or hour hand would go faster, and you would play faster. And in fact, people have done this, and it works a little bit differently than, say, this on top where you're reading from left to right, but you draw a circle or you draw a graph, and you might note different um, different notes or uh, whatever it be. You would draw it in this circle, and back in the day, maybe this wasn't as practical, but now if you have screens where it might change, it might actually make sense for sometimes for situations where this might work. And this is a really crazy thing because we don't read music like this. So when we think of doing something like this, it sounds almost kind of crazy, but um, my point here is that music can be thought of in many different ways, and for Hmong music, it's kind of like that. So when you listen to Hmong musicians and they describe how we play music, they say you start up here with, you know, no holes covered, and then you cover all the holes, and then you have to go all the way back up, then you have to go down again and back, and that's kind of describing, that's like a literal translation from Hmong, so it sounds kind of weird and simplified in English, but what it says is, in music, you build up to something, and then there's a climax, and then you work back down, and you build up, and there's that inherent emotion, right? So we think about what makes people good speakers, and in Hmong music, a good speaker sometimes oftentimes makes a good musician because they really know what grabs your attention and how to stress the music. And if we think about music in general that way, it kind of makes sense, right? You sometimes, you listen to people and you just think, like that person is just such a good speaker, or that person is just not that great of a speaker. And there are the obvious things like how people change their voice, but sometimes there's just that one thing that you can't really grasp onto. And I guess that sometimes you listen to people play music and you're just like, oh, I like how that person plays, or I don't like how that person plays. And there are just those little small nuances. But when I'm describing music, so let me demonstrate again. I like to use this one to demonstrate how we really imitate music or speech, because you can hear it really clear with this. This is danya, and this is a mouth harp. Some people call it the jaw harp. Some people call it the Jew harp. Has nothing to do with Jewish people, but I don't know where that name comes from. But jaw harp, Jew harp, mouth harp. This is also the instrument, and many cultures have a version of the jaw harp or the mouth harp, but this is actually the instrument that creates the sound of Tigger's tail in Winnie the Pooh, where he jumps up and goes boing, 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 that sound. So I'm gonna try to see if it's very quiet, so we'll see if my speakers catch it. So when Tigger jumps, go boing, 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 and that's one of the sounds. But for example, a phrase that's used a lot, a motif in Hmong music, is gu yo kia kia, which gu yo kia means I will travel a really far way, or I will run run. Kikia means run run, but when you use it together, it means like run a far way or travel a far way. So gu yo kikia. If I play that on here, you can really kind of hear how it mimics those words. So gu yo kia kia, gu yo kia kia. So that's like really, really, it's almost like the same thing. And when you're playing music, you usually try to err more on the music side and less on the linguistic side sometimes. So Hmong musicianship is very much on how can you speak words with music, but at the same time make it not just words, and at the same time play with the grammar of the Hmong language enough that it can still change the sound in a way that's understandable. So each tone has to be played in a certain musical interval in relationship to the other tones of the words. So you're always solving this immediate linguistic riddle in your head with every note. You always have to think about, okay, the next word that I want to say, what tone is it? Is it Neng? 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 You know, for my name, for example. Which tone is it? And how must I play that tone in music? Like which note of the scale that I'm playing in, which note must that linguistic tone be on? And then how must I stress that note? Which parts of the note are loud and which parts of the note are quiet? And how do I enunciate that note to make it sound correct? So, for example, if I say nhóc khó từ, or có nhóc khó từ, right? Có nhóc khó từ means where are you? And if you think about that, the ga means you. It has that K sound at the front. Ga. K is like it's a really harsh sound. It's really abrupt. Ga. And then nya is like a NY sound, like a nya. Nya is quiet, is like a softer. And then ka is in back of your throat. It's like a harsh sound. It's like the ga nya ka tu. And then tu is that T. And that's also another rough sound. So when I say con nhóc khó tứ, I have to say, I play it like this. Con nhóc khó tứ. And the khó is just like a tap on this, and that it mimics your tongue tapping the roof of your mouth. So con nhóc khó tứ. And then you can't forget the fact that ga is a tone that's low, linguistically low. Nya and ka are tones that are really high, and tu is in the middle. And in fact, that's mimicked through the music. So ka is a linguistically low tone, and we play that as a low note. Nya ka is nya and ka are the high tones, and that's played with just this one hole covered, so it's the high note. If you just play like that, then it doesn't mimic nya ka, and then tu is in the middle, and you cover this first hole. So those linguistic tones, they really are, if they're a low tone, they're played with low notes, and if they're a high tone, they play with high notes. So your brain is constantly figuring out that riddle of, okay, what tone is this word? Do I play with a high note? Do I play it with a low note? What consonant is at the beginning? Is it a hard consonant or is it a soft consonant? And then you have to think about, okay, now what about the music? Like, if I just, instead of saying where are you, if I say where you are, and if it sounds musically better, does it make sense though? And maybe it doesn't make sense. That's not necessarily a good example, but in music, sometimes we mix around words or we use slang, and it is able to, the meaning still comes across because it's music and it's kind of creative and it's slang. And Hmong has that, as well as the music. It can't reproduce language 100% perfectly. Otherwise, you would be hearing the same thing as my voice. But I used this as an example. I like to compare Hmong music to Hmong. I like to call it as like a musical language, to as opposed to like a written language like English, where, for example, in English, if I wrote this, hello, my name is Neng, it's nice to meet you, this is like grammatically correct and the spelling is correct, right? This would be like spoken Hmong, where you could hear every consonant, every vowel, every part of the language. And then this, what about if I wrote it like this? You would still be able to decipher that, right? That's kind of like Hmong music, where it doesn't reproduce the language 100%, but when you hear it, you're still able to decipher it, and you know very clearly, oh, this is what that person, that musician means. And so your brain automatically fills in the gaps, and it's incredible. In the field of neurolinguistics is just a developing field, because just recently do we have brain scanning machines, but we're beginning to learn all these cool things about language and about music and about uh, just brain neuroscience in general that we've never known before. And Hmong music is uh, starting to become part of that because of the 7,000 languages in the world. It's the only language that reproduces our language, our spoken language, through our music almost all the time. So Hmong music is almost always reproducing the Hmong language, and that's what makes Hmong music so unique because no other of the other over 6,000 languages on the planet, no language does that, and we get to be part of that because there's such a big Hmong community in Wisconsin, and if we continue to value it and do programs like this, it encourages this intangible heritage of humanity to continue. And last week, I remember talking to the music teachers, and we talked about, Hmong kids at this age, say third through fifth grade, they might not know that this is what Hmong music is capable of yet, which actually makes sense because if you think about, say, in the West, until third, fourth, fifth grade, many kids might not know that you could read music, that you can write music on paper and read it. And unless obviously your parents are very into music and they give you piano lessons when you're three, which happens in the Hmong community too. Some people really like music and they make their kids take music lessons when they're three. But if we value these cool parts of our community, it really allows us to think and stress things in different ways. And so I've been talking for 30 minutes already. I know I just keep talking forever, but if I want to like open everyone up to questions, otherwise I just keep talking. So are there any questions before I just keep going?
Neng, I was just wondering, this is Lynette, and I was wondering, are there different like levels of Hmong music? Because like I think about when it comes to like, I don't know, nursery rhyme songs for kids and things in that I can relate to in English. And I don't know if that exists in
Yeah, so are there different like levels of um Hmong music? And yes, there's definitely different levels of Hmong music. So for example, this first instrument, or not this first instrument, but this instrument that I played, the ya, this is also made of that copper alloy, so the brass, zinc, uh, tin, and silver. It is probably one of the first instruments kids play because it's so similar to your speech. Um, and besides, singing, because everyone is singing. So when I'm thinking of nursery rhymes, I'm thinking of in Hmong singing as well. There are Hmong traditional folk songs. There's those tone interval connections as well. So there's always you're always thinking about the linguistic tone you're about to say, from your actual vocal cords and where you have to place that on the musical scale that you're happening to be singing in. And that could just change depending on how you feel you want to sing like a low scale or a high scale, or you want to sing in whatever scale that day, because however your voice is feeling. But this because it mimics the Hmong language so closely, I would say this would be one of the first instruments kids learn. And it's not just because of the linguistic thing, it's also just culturally that's how it happens. Sometimes, say back in like Thailand or Laos, one of the jobs that kids were given as soon as they could, understand words and be responsible. So let's say like the same age we give kids chores in the West. So maybe 5, 6 years you might give them simple chores, but at that age, kids would be told to watch the buffaloes and make sure that they don't eat the rice and eat the crops So the buffalo is allowed to roam, and you have to take the buffaloes out so that they can eat, like they could eat grass. But you have to make sure that they don't go into the garden and eat all the vegetables. So that's one of the jobs that kids have. And then they would come home, and if they come home, they would play this because if their older sibling was working in the field, they would usually have this because this is an instrument that kids, teenagers usually play, and they would go to each other's doors and they would play this because it's quiet. They would play it to each other, and they would. Music is always a way for us to express really hard emotions, right? Whether that be, love is hard to express. If you say, you're so beautiful and I love you so much, I have a giant crush on you. That's really hard to say to someone, but that's why we write songs about it. And that's why music, 90% of music is about love, right? So that's what music also allowed Hmong people to do, is to say words with real words, but also shrouded in music, if you will. So I would go to a girl's door and or window at night, and I would play this to her, and you're so beautiful. I came here a really long way, and I really want to talk to you. And then in the day, the girl would have one of these two under her pillow, and maybe her younger sibling would come and play with it and mess with it, and that's how they would learn this instrument. And when they were out in the fields, because there were leaves, you would take a leaf and you would play it, and you would play words and music on that leaf. So that's another instrument that kids would learn to play early on. And then you would have, the flute, flutes. So flutes are very intuitive because you cover less holes and the note is high, and you cover more holes and the note is lower. And then you have like your Neng instrument, which I have one right here. Um, this is like a very advanced instrument because it's an organ. It has 6 pipes, and so the pipes can play at the same time. So if you cover a hole, say this hole and this hole at the same time, then both of those pipes make a sound at the same time. So then you have like chords going on, and not just singular notes. And uh, also with the Neng, culturally, it's used in funerals. So for funerals, because Hmong music was not written, you would have to memorize like over 100 hours um, ritual music, and it's just incredible how good how good of a memory Hmong musicians have. I think every culture we grow up in, it gives us different strengths, and for Hmong culture, Hmong people just have like really good memories because a lot of the history isn't written and is very oral. So Hmong funerals traditionally lasted 7 days, and each day the Neng would be always playing. So if you played like 20 hours of Neng every day, you would have to memorize over 140 hours of just ritualistic music. So it's pretty incredible, but there are definitely different levels. Um,
Neng, we had a couple of questions in the
yeah.
chat. One was, can you play a bit of that for us? I believe that was regarding the leaf. And then the other question is, when people sing songs or play a mouth harp, do they play together at the same time or more back and forth to each other?
Yeah, so mostly it's back and forth. Home music is usually solo, and the reason again is because it's imitating speech. So if everyone is talking at the same time, then you're not going to hear what anybody is saying. Um, there are instances where Hmong musicians will play together and they will harmonize. Um, so especially in like parts of China, Hmong people will play the Neng together, and the Neng will be, there'll be different sizes. They'll be picked according to what notes and what chords harmonize well together. And if they want it to be like something that's happy sounding or sad sounding, depending on what you think is sad or happy. And then there's also like the violin, the 2-string violin, which the word Hmong word in gong non ja. And gong non ja, people usually sing and they'll play it at the same time. Obviously, you can't blow the flute and sing at the same time, but you can do that with the violin. And then the Neng is usually played with the drums as well at the funeral. And then, yeah, people will play back and forth to each other. So this, again, I talked about how music allows us to talk about really hard, emotionally difficult things. So this instrument is it's it's a instrument of romance traditionally. So it would be a way for Hmong people to talk about. It's really quiet, so you would go and you would play it at a girl's window or her wall, and you could hear it just through the wall, just barely, and it would be a love instrument that you play at night, and you would say, you know, I love you, and then the girl would play it back. Same with the flute. It's a little louder, so you could play it like, say, uh, across a house or something. And then there's the leaf where you could play literally across mountains. So we saw before with those linguistic graphs where the voices had there's more nuance to voice, where whistling is more clear on the graphs. And one thing that whistling languages allow you to do is to talk over longer distances. So in linguistic studies, if you have a really loud voice and you can scream really loud on like a good clear day, people will hear you up to around 200 meters away. But if you can whistle really loud, people can hear that whistle very clearly up to 2 kilometers away. So that allows people to communicate really long distances. And we find in linguistics that whistled languages where people talk in ways not necessarily whistling, but through like it mostly is whistling, but I'll demonstrate. I'll have to go get a leaf right upstairs, but um, um, leaves are really loud, so that allows us to communicate across mountains. There's cultures in the Arctic Circle that when they were hunting whales to communicate across the ocean, instead of yelling across the ocean and the ice, they would whistle. So you could coordinate hunts, like, okay, the whale's over here now, or the narwhal, come over here and we'll work on hunting this animal together. But that allowed you to communicate over several kilometers rather than just a few hundred meters. So it's again, it speaks to how like incredible the human mind is in able to decode these messages. Um, yeah, let's see. What else did I have? Yeah, we talked last week. I was asked a really good question about how we would teach Hmong music to like other folks. And I thought it was a really hard question, but I thought about it, and I really do think that to learn Hmong music, you have to really learn the Hmong language. It's kind of impossible to learn Hmong music without learning to speak Hmong. And that's where like if we're not careful, and then we're kind of just uh not doing justice to how cool of something Hmong is. So I was talking to Mandy about we could take a Hmong tune and we could tell someone to teach that tune, and anyone could learn that tune, but then you wouldn't understand the meaning behind the music, like the literal meaning. And I compared it to, for example, imagining a culture where if you were teaching a non-English speaker, let's say you wanted to teach them how to write in English, right? Or to speak English. And we wanted to teach these non-English speakers to write in English. And we taught them that this word, that meant a furry animal that wags its tail and barks, right? So we taught them this. And now they know how to write the word dog. They can write the word dog, and they know that these random scribbles mean an animal with that tail and it barks. But they don't actually know that D makes a D sound and O makes that aw sound, and they don't know that the G makes that G sound. They don't know that this is actually how writing works. The D, G, dog. They don't know how to sound it out. They just know that this random scribble means dog. And you know, letters are just random scribbles, right? We just attributed meaning to them. But now they know how to write this word. Can you truly say that they know English writing now? You know, they don't actually know how to write English, right? They just know how to copy these random scribbles. They don't know how English writing works. And so could we teach English this way? Yes, but we're doing English a disservice. We're doing a disservice to how cool writing actually is. And for Hmong music, it's very much the same thing. If we teach just tunes without teaching Hmong words, then we're really doing a disservice to the language and the music. And we're not like, if we would refuse to teach English without teaching the da, g, and it's not that we're gatekeeping English, it's because we really want to teach you how the actual language works. And I think it's the same with Hmong music. We have to really, if you really want to learn it, and then you kind of have to learn how to speak Hmong as well, and that allows you to then really appreciate the music and be like, oh, okay, this is how it works, and you can teach other people, because we can imagine that there was a culture that they had writing, right? They had writing just like English does, just like Hmong does, or Spanish or French, or all these languages that have writing systems. Imagine there's a culture that had writing, but instead of writing words, they just wrote random letters. Like they just wrote random letters. They wrote an A here, a B here, a Z there. They never actually wrote words. They just wrote random letters because they thought it looked cool or whatever. We as English speakers and English writers, we would look at their culture and be like, why would you just write random letters? That's like crazy. Like, why don't you actually make words out of them, and books and stories? And sometimes that's kind of how Hmong musicians look at Western music. We're like, so you just put random sounds together? Why don't you actually make words out of them, and like make stories and make meaning out of them? Why do you just put random sounds together? It's almost like that. Not quite to that extreme, but to give that idea. There's a question from Barb that says, in times of war or conflict, with music developed as a way to communicate with each other, avoiding the enemy from knowing what is being communicated, because music can be so innocent. Yeah, definitely. So there's a few instances of that. We know, like in US history, they're the Navajo code talkers, which is a phenomenal piece of history. And then in Hmong history, there was a time where in the Hmong ancestral lands, which is what we call China nowadays. But China has over 300 languages. It's a very linguistically diverse country. We just know about Mandarin, which is the main language spoken in China, just like how English is the main language spoken in the USA. But in China, the Han, which is the majority ethnic group which speak Mandarin, hundreds of years ago, they forced Hmong people to speak Mandarin, and it was like this cultural genocide alongside with literal genocide. So they would be killing Hmong people to try to exterminate Hmong people, and also it was genocide along with cultural genocide. So if you spoke Hmong, the history was that if you spoke Hmong and if you were caught speaking Hmong and you weren't speaking Mandarin, they would literally cut your tongue off. They would literally just cut your tongue off for punishment, so that you just couldn't talk anymore. And during that time, Hmong people used music as a form of rebellion. So instead of saying, okay, we're going to speak Mandarin, we said, it's almost like, yeah, okay, F you, we're going to speak our language anyway, but we're going to be really creative and resilient, and we're going to put it in our music. And you won't even know, because your music cannot do this. Your music, you don't even know that this is possible. But Hmong music, we can speak with it. So we were able to, that was one way that Hmong people said, we were able to preserve our language because we put it in our music. And it wasn't necessarily that we put it in at that time. Maybe it's always been like that, and it just happened that at that time that allowed Hmong people to keep speaking Hmong. But it was, a form of resistance and a way for Hmong people to go back and be like, look how creative and resilient we are. And it still serves that purpose to this day, as well as, yeah, during the Vietnam War, even there are stories of people whistling to communicate, because the communists, the Vietnamese communists and the Laotian communists were, um, killing Hmong people who had sided with the U.S. So Hmong people, because they're the people that were fleeing to Thailand to cross the Mekong River, they were all the Hmong people that had fought for the side of the U.S. We would whistle to communicate as well, because back then, not everyone had a walkie-talkie, not everyone had radios, so it wasn't just useful for hunting or communication, but there are all these little bits of history where sometimes if we lose it, we don't really understand that how much value it might have until it's gone. And languages are one of those things. Cultures in general are one of those things. But yeah, Hmong music is there's definitely war and conflict. Hmong history is strife with that, but very rich in resilience as well. One question is, do men and women play different instruments? Would a girl ever go to a guy's window and play a song? Yeah, they do. They do play instruments. There's no like strict cultural rules on there, but it's because of all these systems and pressures that were put in different cultures, that people just err towards playing different instruments. That happens in Western music as well. I'm sure there are more like male drum players than female drum players, so there's no like rules on it, but it definitely there's societal pressures. So the thing is mainly a male instrument. There are a lot of women, especially nowadays, that play it. The tamblai is usually the big ones, like this one is usually male instrument too. There are small reed ones that same instrument, just smaller, and those are women instruments. I say women instruments in the same sense that I would say a drum is a boy instrument. So, and then this the mouth harp, both sexes pretty equally, because this is one where you really do talk back and forth. Same with the leaf, same with little instruments like this where they're very loud and used to communicate. One reason why the thing is used a lot by males is because, like a lot of cultures, Hmong culture is patriarchal, and in Hmong religion, most the religious leaders were mostly male, so they would play this. This is the instrument that it talks. It uses Hmong words to talk about how to reach the ancestral lands or the afterlife after you die. So in a way, it's the instrument that talks to the dead and reproduces the Hmong scripture that tells you how to go to the afterlife. But because Hmong religious leaders tend to be male, just like in I think probably the vast majority of religions, that's why this instrument has been mostly associated with males. This one as well, you would play to a girl and then she would hear you. Maybe she likes you, maybe she doesn't, and she would have a smaller one that she play back. But if it's like a two-way communication, then it's mostly both sexes. I would say you see the most difference with just the peng instrument, but everything else is pretty like equal, because they are very used by both sexes for communication. Any other questions? Should I get I'll go get a leaf while someone thinks of a question. I didn't bring one here with me, but it's just right in that next room.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, I know that some of you are going to need to get going, but if you have any more questions, while he's grabbing that, you're welcome to throw it in the chat. If you don't want to speak up, that's fine. We can go from there. Barb, that was the Navajo Code Talkers. You're going to want to read that book, Barb. It's fascinating.
All right. So I have a leaf here. This is a pothos leaf. You can get them at Home Depot for like $10, but once the leaves start coming in outside, you can kind of choose anything that's a little waxy. A lot of ornamental plants that people plant outside their houses are great for this. Then there's like, I know Solomon seal, you can do it with it. That's a native plant to Wisconsin or to the Midwest in general. But so what Hmong people did, this is a really incredibly loud instrument. Like it is deafening if you're playing it right next to somebody's ear, which is why it's used to communicate long distances. But you put it in your mouth and you fold it, and then you blow out the top, your top lip. So, and then that part right here, it'll vibrate, and that's what makes the sound. And you can play, it's not just Hmong music, you could play any song. So I could do like, let's see, the ABCs, right? And then someone give me a song that I might know. I don't know that many songs, to be honest. Let's see. What's like a good... I'm trying to think of songs that I learned in band in high school, but that's been a while ago now. What about what's a classic song? Someone give me an idea.
God Bless America. Do you know that?
I can't think of the two. What about the Star Spangled Banner?
Okay.
Man, that's the one that people always butcher when they have to sing on stage. So maybe I don't do that one. Let's do The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Someone sing it for me so I remember. Sing the chorus for me or whatever.
In
Mandy?
the jungle, the mighty
jungle, the lion sleeps tonight. Okay, thank you. Okay, so and then what's the part? Oh, that's really... So yeah, you have to play like, this isn't necessarily the best leaf. You have to choose one that's like, this one's slightly too old. If it's like an old leaf, then they get thick and they're not as flexible and pliable. And then if they're too young, they're too soft. And most people usually use banana leaves, but this is okay.
When you're playing that, are you also putting pressure on your upper lip at the same time as you're blowing to create the different sounds?
That's a good question. Yeah, so if you do, that helps so that the air doesn't go like in between your gums and your lips.
Okay.
But you don't have to.
Because it almost looked like your fingers were moving on your lip, like it was making.
Yeah, so
a difference.
it does do that sometimes, and I think that's just instinctual.
Okay.
And it helps you to, if you pucker your lips more, it makes the sound higher because the hole is smaller. But all the air is coming out from the top, none from the bottom. Mostly I'm holding it on the bottom of my lip so that no air comes out of the bottom, and then you fold it over sideways like this, and you're blowing out just the top right here. And then you kind of like, if you relax the leaf, it's lower. If you pull it taut, then obviously the sound gets higher, and the learning curve is it's kind of like whistling, where when you're just learning it, you can never get it and you're like, this is impossible. But then one day it happens and you're like, oh wow, I could suddenly play all the notes or whistle all the notes. But it's exactly like that.
Hey, Neng, can you play the ya a little bit, like a couple sentences on the ya?
Yeah, sure. So then ja, yeah, let's so this instrument, yeah, let me play a little bit. I will kind of say what I'm gonna play, and then I will play it. So one of the things that you do for in musical languages and whistled languages, this kind of happens across all languages that are whistled, is you play a little intro, and those are like the only times where it's not really like strict words. And those kind of words are like when we're singing la 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 la, you know, that la, it doesn't mean anything, but it's kind of like a placeholder. Um, in Hmong, we play that to be like, hey, I'm gonna start playing. This is the scale that I'm playing in, and this is the style I'm playing in. And now that I'm gonna start playing, listen to me. It kind of gives you all of that information in one. So at the beginning, I would say, Bibo, Bebo, call, which doesn't mean anything, but it kind of tunes my music instrument and my mind as well. It tells me also what musical scale I have to sing in. So I'm gonna try to go closer to my computer so then y'all can hear as well. Cú tu mê luang gạo ca linh yo e cú yo kia kia tuột sọc nè cha mi tê trồng du no e. Cú yo chi mùa tu mê luang gạo nhỏ khó tư e. Em chê nhà yo chỉ e khó cú lu mê xia em. Ê nị yo chi bỏ mu kia tu lặng lo tu tư em. Yeah, usually you would cover your mouth like this too, and then you could kind of change the tones a little bit. But if I do that, then I don't think my computer will capture the sound. So sometimes there's a little bit of difficulties playing music with a computer, and you know the microphones obviously never catch all the sound, especially all those ornamentations at the beginning of notes. But yeah, that's a little bit on the ja, and I know we're just over an hour, so any thoughts to wrap up, y'all?
I think Martha and Grant on Away with Words on public radio would love to talk to you.
Yeah, you know, I
This is
think this
fascinating how it all
is
ties
super
together.
fascinating.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tell them to reach out to me. I would love to talk more. I think it's something that when people understand or when people learn about it, they're just like, wow, that is so cool. I never didn't even know that was possible.
It is. This is
Hey,
fascinating.
hey, Neng, when you leave at the end, can you play the flute a few words of saying goodbye to us? We can hear.
No pressure.
I could. Yeah, I could make something up like that. I think that's one thing about musical languages also is they're so like they're very you can in theory talk about anything, but one thing that also helps people understand what you're saying is that they're kind of they're almost socially constrained to different themes in life, just in kind of like how you wouldn't bring a rock band to a funeral. I mean, you could, and if someone really wants that, that would be really cool. But normally that doesn't happen. So for the cha, usually it's constrained to like love and like and talking about love, and whether that's like romantic love or familial love between like parents. Um, but that's one thing that also helps us understand it. Like you would never play the ta to teach someone how to fix a car. That would just be like impossible. But I will play like what did I play at the beginning? I forgot what I played, but I'll play something different. How about that? different words than what I played at the beginning. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think I remember now. I played at the beginning like a sadder song. So this one I'll play like a happier song, a song like love, a song about love and about it'll be like Hmong music is very improv, just like how we improv when we're talking. So that's why I'm saying like we have to always solve those riddles in our head. So you don't really plan about what you're gonna say when it's a conversation. You just kind of say. So this will be just like a normal. A lot of things that people say in the past to girls would be like, "Hey, I like came here to your town and I saw you and you're very beautiful." And I'll tell you that I don't have any love in my life. So I want to tell you, I want to ask you if you would be willing to, go on a date with me or play a few words on your flute for me. And I'm going to say this to you really well and straightforward. And I want to hear what you'll say. And then she would say whatever she says back. Maybe she says, I love you. You're cool too. Maybe she says, I'm not ready to talk to you on her da, and then you would then end the conversation, obviously. But yeah, I'll play like a love song. So I'll explain a little bit. So sometimes what people, uh, um, again, this is kind of like learning to write. So after you learn to speak Hmong, not everyone who speaks English is not necessarily literate. Nowadays, in the US at least, it's almost 100%. But not everyone who speaks English is necessarily can read English. So you kind of have to learn the little tricks to listen for the Hmong words in the da as well. But because of that, a lot of times Hmong musicians will explain it with their spoken word after they play that. So I'm gonna explain that and I'll sing it with my spoken voice. And if you were to line, like this up, what I just played with what I'm gonna sing right now, if I can remember it correctly, it would line up pretty closely, just like what I showed in those linguistic graphs. So at the beginning, we play do a that kind of tunes our minds and our instrument. Do a oh yeah. Do a chan ya chan du thi a ku tu me luang gao e chan ya chan du thi e chỉ lần tu li cú nó e yua kia kia tua cho nè cha mi tê trồng tu nó e nia Yua chi mua tu mei luang gao, nhỏ khó tư o cú tu mei luang gao, mong ni yua kia kia tuat, cho nề tra mi tê trồng tu nói, cú ni hai rong rong trâu cò, cú yua chi mua tu mei luang gao, nhỏ khó tuyệt. 你若靠靠诶，你若叽叽咕噜没笑，咕嘟没乱搞，梦儿诶，咕海融融周搞诶，搞若海里加周咕啊咕嘟没乱搞，梦啊梦啊呀。More or less that. I didn't remember the word for words, but it was the same kind of theme. And it was in the English translation is Due Due is like oh world. It's so the weather is clear today, my sweet Bonnie maiden, something like that. I ran all the way to your side of the heavens, all the way on this far land over here. And I will tell you that I truly have no other love in my lands back home. So I'm telling you really clearly, and I'm telling the real absolute truth. So I want you to tell me the real absolute truth. How do you feel about me? Because I don't have a love anywhere, and it makes my heart ache, and it makes my heart search for koshia. It makes my heart koshia, and koshia is a word that doesn't exist in English, but implies that you're heartbroken, but it implies that your heart is healing as well. Koshia literally ko means to fix, and then shia is liver. The Hmong people don't use heart for emotions. We use our liver. So I like to say it's because the liver is bigger than the heart. It's 5 times bigger than the heart. So Hmong people love you 5 times as much. Or if you get on our nerves, we're gonna hate you 5 times as much. So Hmong people use the liver to express emotion. So we're liver broken, not heartbroken. We feel pain in our liver. We love you with all of our liver, not our hearts. But anyway, yeah, it's called Shia, which means like my liver is broken, but it's healing. It is like in the emotion. It is healing. So it's like it's saying that like I'm really sad and angry, and it pains me that I have no love, but now that I'm here, my heart is healing because I see you. So what will you say to me after I have finished this song? Oh yes is the end. Oh yes is like, oh yes, like now you tell me what you're gonna say. And it also says, okay, now I'm done talking, now it's your turn to talk to me.
Well, thanks so much, Neng, for coming. I'm sure, Neng, if anybody else has any questions, I'm sure he's happy to stick around for a couple of minutes. But thanks again for, gosh, it's such a deep and rich conversation about Hmong music. And thanks again to Northwoods International School and the Cross Public Education Foundation for sponsoring this event as well.
Thank you everyone for coming and giving me your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neng. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neng.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.